Yeah, what's good, Cloud Gang? We back with another reaction video. Roll that intro. So first things first, today's video is 2021 NBA Draft Player Comparisons. Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, and more. CBS Sports. I want to see this real quick because the draft is in about 1 hour and 20 minutes. So I'm going to try to get this video out before then. Got to record it, edit, and put it out. I'm a big basketball fan. Hopefully you guys are too. We could talk about it in the comments. Hopefully you're watching the draft tonight. Yo, if this is your first time here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on post notifications, and leave a like on the video. Let's hop right into this.
This hour of HQ is presented by Jeep. 24 hours or so away from the NBA draft, Cade Cunningham likely to hear his name called first. Detroit in possession of that top pick. So it looks like Cunningham is headed to Motown momentarily. Jalen Green is the favorite to go number 2 to Houston. Green playing in the G League last season. Evan Mobley and Jalen Suggs likely to go top 4 as well. Many analysts saying there's a drop-off then from 4 to 5, but that drop-off is likely to Scotty Barnes and not Jonathan Kaminga, who many had in the top 5 several months ago. Kaminga is down there in the 7th position in our draft prospect rankings. NBA writer Colin Ward-Henniger has draft comps for some of the top prospects in the draft, comps for ceiling, floor, and sweet spot. So it's not just one comp, he's got 3 for you. And let's start with the man at the top, Cade Cunningham. Pistons fans hoping your comps are accurate because the names that you're throwing out there and comparing him to are eye-popping.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've paid attention to this draft process at all, you've heard the comparisons between Cade Cunningham and Luka Doncic, and you're right to be skeptical. I was too. But when you dig into this film, it's really remarkable.
Only comparison I heard between Cade's Cunningham comparison is Jason Tatum. And then somebody else told me that he doesn't play anything like him. So I don't know. Let me know what y'all think about that.
And eerie, how similar they are in terms of the way that they operate, the way that they can impact the game, both as scorers and as passers. I actually cut a video going, one Luka clip, one Cade clip back to back, and there are so many similarities there. So I think obviously this is a ceiling. This is something that he has to hit on all of his potential to achieve. But you're looking at a guy who can be a multiple-time All-Star, potentially one of those MVP candidates like Doncic is, and have an impact immediately in the NBA. If you're looking at more of a sweet spot, someone who might not be at Doncic's level, I think early Grant Hill is a good comparison. I know he's a very good player, but someone who just kind of does a little bit of everything, probably not as athletic as Hill, but I think the way that he impacts the game in terms of his basketball IQ, he can pass, he can rebound, do a little bit of everything to help contribute to winning. I think that's probably more where he'll end up. And then if he doesn't hit on any of his potential, I think the worst case scenario is a guy like Nick Batum, who's a very good pro, a guy who's bounced around a little bit, has kind of been a borderline all-star at times. But that's just if Cunningham's skills never quite reach that elite level. I think that's pretty much his floor as a guy like Batum.
Doncic and early Grant Hill, man, if they could get either one of those comparisons, they will love it in Detroit. Let's move on to Evan Mobley, who could be the number 2 pick off the board. Skinny, mobile, big, he can shoot the ball, plays great D, sounds a lot like a current NBA star.
Yep, again, you've probably heard the Anthony Davis comparisons. They get a little old. I feel like anybody who has those traits that you described tends to get compared to Anthony Davis. But I think they're apt with Mobley, another guy who didn't necessarily bring it every single night at USC, but when you dig into the film, you see these skill sets. He can handle the ball, he can be a one-man offense, and then defensively, his ability to switch onto perimeter guards as well as protect the rim. It's exactly what you want in a modern big. I'm calling him a big, but one scout told me he shouldn't even be considered a big. He's more of a 7-foot wing with the type of skills that he has. So I think that really describes someone who can have an Anthony Davis-like impact if he does end up fulfilling that potential. But with that comes the floor, right? So if he doesn't reach all of that stuff, it's very hard to find bigs who have skills like Mobley, so I went a little bit smaller and said that his floor is probably someone like Larry Nance Jr., a taller version of that. someone who can impact the game with his athleticism, but never quite reaches those levels in all those areas. And then for the sweet spot, I think a guy like Bam Adebayo is almost perfect. Someone who's not necessarily your best player on a championship team, someone who can be that 1B or maybe the number 2, can impact your defense in phenomenal ways and really anchor your defense, and then become a playmaker, someone you can facilitate through on offense. So I think that's probably the type of player we're looking at with Mobley, but with an upside of a guy like Anthony Davis.
Moving down to Jalen Green, who's likely to go number 2 to the Rockets. He's explosive. You might even say that he glides around the court, Colin.
Man, you're really setting me up here, Chris. I love it. Yeah, Clyde the Glide Drexler is what I think of when I see Jalen Green. I've been watching Jalen Green play since high school, and the thing that stands out immediately is his athleticism, just an elite NBA athlete. I think, like Drexler, he's going to be able to score from day one coming into the NBA, and it's just a question of whether he can develop those secondary and tertiary skills, playmaking, rebounding, all the things that Drexler was able to add to his game to become a Hall of Fame player and potential best player, second best player on a championship team. I think Green has all of that ability, and that's a reason why Houston is kind of zeroing in on him at number 2. I think worst case scenario, you're probably looking at a guy like Jordan Clarkson, which is nothing to shake your head at. Probably a bench scorer, heat check, bucket getter type, who can carve out a place for himself in the league. That's really, if Green's consistency doesn't reach the level where he can be a starting caliber player, I think a bench 6th man of the year type candidate is really what we're looking at there. And then for a sweet spot, a guy who's currently coming into his own in the NBA, Zach LaVine. I think it's a really good comp for him. The body types are very similar. As I mentioned, the elite athleticism. LaVine struggled for his first few years with his efficiency. We knew he could score, but he couldn't necessarily do it in an efficient way. I think that's a good blueprint for Green to follow as he develops into the NBA and potentially become an all-star like LaVine has.
Our next guy might have the highest floor, though. Jalen Suggs, elite defender. How good could he be?
Yeah, he's extraordinary. I think a lot of the scouts believe defensively he could be, an all-NBA type defender, and that's the reason why for his ceiling I picked Gary Payton. It's very ambitious. I don't know if a lot of scouts think he'll reach that, but I think the potential is certainly there, especially on the defensive end where he can really lock down as a big guard both guard positions. And then offensively, he's a menace in transition. So his half-court playmaking probably needs to improve to get to Peyton's level. But I think in transition, you think of Gary Payton throwing those lobs to Sean Kemp. I think that's the type of impact that Suggs can have. And then for his floor, like you said, he doesn't really seem like a guy who's going to be a bust. So I picked Derek White from the San Antonio Spurs. Again, a bigger combo guard, a guy that helps you in so many ways. But where the difference is White, none of his skills necessarily reach that elite level. So if Suggs just kind of stays the way he is, doesn't develop, I think your worst case scenario is a guy like White, who's a starting caliber NBA guard. So nothing wrwrong there. And then his sweet spot, I look at a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, who very similar to White, came into the league, could do a little bit of everything, but has really progressed and become, an efficient three-point shooter, a great scorer in the interior, and then bringing that defense and that size. I think a guy like Brogdon, all-star, borderline all-star, is probably where Suggs end up over the course of his career.
He's got Scotty Barnes as his number 3 player going to the NBA. This is a guy that's rising up the draft boards, probably going to go top 5 in that 5th position. Interesting prospect. Why has he risen, and who would you compare him to?
Yeah, he's probably done more for himself in the pre-draft process than any other prospect, and I think it's really his fit in the modern NBA. 6'9", 7'2" wingspan, ability to guard 1 through 5, and that's why his ceiling is a guy like Draymond Green, which is really, another comparison that you've probably heard if you've been paying attention to the draft process. That's very high praise, but it's a guy who can control the game defensively. He's at that level. You're talking defensive player of the year, can guard 1 through 5. And then offensively, Barnes was a point guard at Florida State. He has ball handling skills. He has passing skills. His shot needs to come along and needs to improve, but Draymond Green proved that you don't necessarily need to be a threat from three-point range in order to become an all-star level player. So I think that's what people are looking at when they see Barnes, particularly in the modern NBA, that he can come in and be that type of player. But with that, a guy who doesn't shoot, a guy who doesn't necessarily score, comes a pretty low floor. And I picked James Johnson, who's kind of bounced around the league a lot, recently played with the Pelicans and the Mavericks. A guy who has all of those skills, but just not quite at the elite level. And if you can't score in the NBA, you will get played off the floor. So you have to be absolutely elite in those other skills in order to stay on the floor. So that's why his floor is a little bit lower than some of the other prospects here. But for a sweet spot, it's interesting because the Raptors have showed some interest in Scotty Barnes. I think a guy on their team already, OG Anunoby, is a pretty good model for what Barnes can become. Someone who can defend from day one, but really improve that offense, where Anunoby has gotten to the point where he can knock down corner threes, he can put the ball on the floor a little bit. I think if Barnes gets to that level, you're looking at a guy who's not necessarily an all-star, but someone who's certainly one on your team and can contribute to winning.
And then there's another guy whose stock has fallen a bit. Jonathan Kaminga, once looked at as a top 5 draft pick, now probably not going to be that. Who are his comps?
Yeah, I think the highest probably ceiling for a guy like Kaminga is DeMar DeRozan, a guy who it's hard to believe now, but DeRozan came into the league, he couldn't really shoot. He's improved to the point where he's a deadly mid-range shooter. I think that's what you see when you see Kaminga. His floor is probably a little bit lower. I think of a guy like Jeff Green, who never really fulfilled that potential. I think that's why he's dropping. You can't pinpoint one particular skill that's going to be his NBA skill. But I think he'll fall somewhere in the sweet spot, which is Rudy Gay, a guy who can come in, get you 18 to 20 points, not necessarily do it in an efficient way, but kind of carve out a career as a helpful NBA player who can score when you need him to.
All right, that's Colin Ward-Hanniger. Full article up on CBSSports.com with draft comps for all the top prospects as we head into the draft.
So that was CBS Sports 2021 NBA Draft Player Comparisons. All right, so I need 2 things from you guys down in the comments. I want to know, who do you think are going to be the top 5 players in the draft tonight? And comment if you're going to watch the draft and if you're excited about the draft. Comment those 2 things down below. Let's enjoy the draft tonight. Hope everybody gets the player that they want. Hope your team is successful. That's the end of the video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Leave a like. Comment down below what other videos you want to see me react to. It's your boy Zente. Catch you in the next one. Bow.
I done seen better days, all the times I done prayed, the hard work soon gon' pay. I done seen better days, I done seen better days, I done seen better days, all the times I done prayed, the hard work soon gon' pay. I done seen better days, I done seen better days, I done seen better days.